What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the Giants sent a freaking army to the Washington Pro Day yesterday. I'm not sure if you guys saw that, but the list of names that they had there, I'm talking General Manager Joe Schoen, of course, Head Coach Brian Daboll, and then you had, Tim McDonald, Executive Personnel Director. You had, of course, Mike Kafka, Wide Receivers Coach Mike Groh, Quarterbacks Coach Shea Tierney. They sent, everybody possible to this event to go scout Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze, who didn't participate in the drills because he already worked out at the Combine, but still notable, he's there. Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk. There's a lot of talent at Washington, even some sleepers that we want to dive into later on in this episode and talk about some potential late round guys that the Giants could target out of Washington, but really just want to take away from the fact that the Giants have gone to all these big quarterback pro days, all these big school pro days, but they haven't sent this many personnel directors and front office executives and coaches to a pro day just yet. This was definitely their biggest turnout at any pro day, and I think that's definitely interesting considering they've already had some coaching experience with Michael Penix at the Senior Bowl. They had, of course, who was it? It was Shea Tierney was there, and I think that he was coaching him at the Senior Bowl, so it's worth noting there's definitely an interest, and now they're going to have Michael Penix in for a 30 visit sometime this week. Definitely interesting, and also all ties in from, I think last month, Alex, we did an episode where Sean O'Hara, we were reacting to his quote where he said that they were drooling over Rome Odunze and were really interested in drafting him. So who knows what's really going on with the New York Giants? Of course, all these rumors, speculation, that is what it is at the end of the day, rumors and speculation. But we definitely have some takeaways, some thoughts and opinions on the Giants sending so many guys out to watch Michael Penix, and also just our opinions on Michael Penix in general we want to share in this episode. Before we do all that and dive into it, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what is your reaction to the Giants sending an army to go watch Michael Penix Jr. and the Washington Pro Day?
Well, they definitely sent an army. I'm doing pretty good. Giants, if there wasn't any obvious indication that they're looking at quarterbacks, this is a big one. They've looked at J.J. McCarthy. They're bringing him in for another visit. They're bringing in Drake May. They didn't go to his pro day in a big swath of fashion, but they are bringing him in for another private workout. So, they're going to get a better look at him behind the scenes rather than in front of everybody where they're scripting everything and it's all, is what it is. Drake May had a couple of beautiful throws, like absolute nuclear bombs freaking downfield, and it was great, but he also had a couple that he airmailed early on. Nothing to be concerned about. I think Jaden Daniels also missed a couple throws, but it is what it is. I don't really take much stock into pro days to begin with. We all got fooled by Zach Wilson. I think the game film says a lot more than a pro day does, personally, when you're in shorts and doing nothing. Some of the athletic traits, Michael Penix obviously ran the 4.46, I believe it was, had a couple of really, really great numerical kind of stock boosting catalysts there, for lack of a better words, but I think that he really showed out. He had a really good day, and he disproved a lot of things about his athletic profile in terms of the speed. The straight line speed is there. I'll talk about that. I really like, what he did in terms of showcasing that he could be more than just a statue in the pocket. The straight line speed is definitely an asset, but I wouldn't call it anything that really moves my needle with him, because when you look at Daniel Jones, really great straight line speed, awful lateral agility. There are limitations to that, and I think that I prefer the guy with a little bit more mobility, like Jaden Daniels or even like Caleb Williams. That ability to stop and start is definitely ideal. But looking at, for example, what Penix does with his arm in terms of his qualities throwing the ball downfield, they're special. Like, he has a really good arm, like a great arm, has the arm talent to get the ball downfield, especially in an offense that wants to be more downfield centric. It definitely fits the Giants mold to a degree. He's not my preference. I'm not the biggest fan of the lefty quarterback situation, just, extending Andrew Thomas at left tackle, changing the blind side at a position that we don't necessarily know how good it's going to be. It's not like the end of the world. It's, a minor detail in a larger conversation. But I also know that the Giants' offensive line is terrible until proven otherwise, and I think that's a fair assessment. I think they're going to be better, but they're terrible until proven otherwise. With that being said, if if Penix is forced to move out of the pocket, let's assume he's the Giants quarterback. If he's forced to move out of the pocket, he's going to be really bad. He was really bad in college. He's against with the number one offensive line. He's going to be even worse at the NFL level with a windy MetLife Stadium and just obviously the other factors that play into better pass rush, better this, better that. But, I'll let you get your takes on Michael Penix, what you saw from him, what you like from his pro day. He definitely showed out. He definitely boosted his stock. A lot of people now saying he's not going to get past the middle of the first round. I still have him as a day 2 player. I don't think he's going to be a first round pick. I don't think he's worthy of being a first round pick. If you're not in love with a quarterback prospect, I don't think you force it. And I'm definitely not in love with Michael Penix at all. Day 2, maybe you take a flyer on him. I still don't think you do. I think you get your quarterback in the first round. You don't take one at all. That's my personal opinion. But a lot of people disagree with that. So Anthony, I'll let you get your take on the idea of maybe moving back and getting him in the first, or waiting until the second, see if he's there, and taking a flyer on him and a little bit later on in the draft.
Yeah, definitely interested to talk about Michael Penix because we've kind of discussed this before, Alex. I'm a little bit higher on him than you are. You see more red flags than I do. I think he's a great pre-snap processor and post-snap processor. I think he goes through his reads exceptionally well, and he is an ideal pocket passing quarterback with an absolute howitzer of an arm. Like, the guy has an absolute rocket launcher attached to his left shoulder, and it's something that excites you. And when you look at his deep ball accuracy, I don't think it's that far off from the top of the class. When you're talking about Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix ranks up there for me. And Drake May also throws a great deep ball. It's a lot of great deep passers in this class, but Michael Penix needs to be in that conversation, and he's got the strong arm, he's got the accuracy. The question was the mobility, but then he went to his pro day yesterday and ran that reported 4.46. Some scouts had him at a 5.58 or somewhere in that range, or a 4.58, whatever it was, but generally speaking, a 4.5-ish range for a quarterback is really fast, a very solid speed. Now, like you said, there's questions about his lateral agility. He didn't do the agility drills, so we don't know how well he moves in a short space versus a long space, but the fact that he can move like that definitely tells you there's something to unlock there with Michael Penix, in my opinion. And I think that's what some scouts are probably seeing. When you look at the players in college who weren't asked to do certain things, can they do those things at the next level? That's kind of the argument for J.J. McCarthy. He wasn't asked to lead a high-level passing attack, but can he in the right situation? That's the argument that everybody makes for him. I think the argument for Michael Penix would be, can he play a more modern NFL offense that asks him to get out of the pocket and move? Maybe he can with the right coaching in the right situation. I think that's something to consider after seeing the results of his pro day. But there's a lot to like about Penix, and I think that if the Giants do want to draft him, so you're going to see the way that the draft board is lined up. They're picking number 6 overall. Likely at number 6, they're going to go wide receiver, whether you're talking Malik Neighbors or maybe they take the other Washington guy, not Michael Penix, but his teammate, Rome Odunze, who I know a lot of Giants fans would be happy with. So then how do you get Michael Penix and Rome Odunze combined? That kind of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase knockoff here. I think that in round 2, you could try and wait for Penix all the way at the number 47 overall pick, though. I don't think he lasts that long. And what I would do if I were the Giants, I would take that 47 pick, some future picks, some mid-round picks. I would trade up into the back end of the first round, draft Michael Penix, and get that 5th-year option, because I think that's really valuable, and it's worth all the draft capital that you're going to trade to get up into the first round to select Michael Penix. But the overall baseline question of, if I were the Giants, would I draft Michael Penix? Would I want him? Personally, this is the way that I would conceptualize this. Injury history is the breakdown here, because it's not actually Michael Penix's injury history that would prevent me from drafting him, because I think he's still worth taking the risk and the gamble on, because he is a good player and he has kind of gotten past those injuries. But the injury history to Daniel Jones is what would prevent me from drafting Michael Penix, because you know that Jones gets hurt frequently. Michael Penix Jr. has that injury history and a couple red flags there. If the Giants are so serious about moving on from Jones because of his injuries, it doesn't make sense for them to draft another quarterback who has an injury history, in my opinion. They seem to want somebody with a clean bill of health, somebody who's perfectly healthy and doesn't have any of those red flags. Michael Penix Jr. just doesn't fit that bill. So while the value might be there to take that quarterback at the end of the first round or even in the second round, that could be an excellent proposition for the Giants. You do have to question the decision making there to move on from the quarterback that you invested $160 million into, to move on from him because of injuries, just to move on to a guy who also has a history of injuries. It doesn't really check out in the logic for me, but there are some different reasons why you might get behind it. Listen, in that national championship game, there were two quarterbacks who were probably going to go in the first round of this year's draft. It was J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix. If you want to go based on who played better in that game is the one that you should draft, the one who played better in that game was Michael Penix. And he didn't play great by any means, but he did make some sick throws, and he did hang in a pocket against a really good Michigan defense and take a beating and throw the ball well. So I think that there is a lot to like with Michael Penix as a pocket passer. I do have questions about when he moves off of the spot. In fact, if you take a look at his completion percentage over expected while moved, it's actually in the negative 10%, meaning he was expected to complete more than 10% of the passes that he didn't complete. So the guy doesn't play well when he's moved off of the spot. When he gets pushed out of the pocket due to pressure, he doesn't necessarily play well. But Alex, I will turn this back to you and ask you, of that other scenario that I kind of laid out there, Giants maybe take Odunze at 6, or maybe even this. Maybe they trade down to around pick 10, take Rome Odunze, get a little bit of extra draft capital in the middle rounds, and then trade up into the back end of the first round to get Michael Penix. Do you like that? Do you think that's fascinating? Or are you kind of one of those guys, those fans who's just like, I don't want to touch Michael Penix with a 10-foot pole because of the injury history?
I mean, look, there's a lot of reasons I don't want to draft Michael Penix. I just personally don't think it's worth taking a gamble on a quarterback in the second round if you're going to pass. Look, I think the top four, it's like those top four quarterbacks, the drop off after them, I think is significant. I even think there's a quite sizable drop off from May, Daniels, and Caleb Williams to J.J. McCarthy. I think in terms of actual proven game experience, there is a drop off there. I think J.J. McCarthy could be fine. He might have the highest floor of any player, but I think the other three guys have higher ceilings. I think Penix is a humongous risk. Like if you're looking at probability, I think that on the MetLife turf, not only do I not trust him to be healthy long term, but our offensive line is bad right now until proven otherwise, and I just don't trust him to be, good in this offense. I think he's going to develop a couple bad habits early on if the Giants decide to start him immediately. And, I just don't see the real, top upside. He's also 23 years old. Are we really going to take a guy that needs a couple years of development who's going to be 24 in his rookie season? You know what I mean? I just don't see it there. I don't see it. I don't like it. Taking a flyer on a quarterback in the second round, moving back up into the first, get his fifth-year option, I just don't like it. It doesn't make sense to me. Others, maybe. The injury history, the fact that he's terrible outside of the pocket, other reasons, the fact that the Giants aren't ready to host a quarterback, that they don't have the situation that Michael Penix needs to be a really solid player on day one. That's my bigger concern. I know you could get Odunze, you could move up into the first round and maybe get Penix too. But I just, even if, Michael Penix does get Odunze, I just don't think we're in the right situation for him. I'd rather go with someone younger that we can develop over time, someone that has, that luxury. And look, Jaden Daniels is not any younger. He's the same age, but I think Jaden Daniels is a much better player on day one than Michael Penix. Just a much better player all around. That's my personal opinion. But, J.J. McCarthy at 20 years old, obviously, there's a lot of upside to that, having a young player. Drake May, also young. I think he's 21 or something like that. I actually think Drake May is probably the best fit for the Giants. Throw the ball downfield well, got some athleticism to his frame. He's a smart player, lots of developmental upside, and he's young. I think of all those things blended together, he probably makes the most sense for the Giants. But again, beggars can't be choosers, and we have the 6th overall pick, so it's unlikely that we get him in the first place. But if we're not going to get one of those top four guys, I just don't see why we would take a unnecessary risk on a guy in the second round. I think we have a lot of other holes, and we could get a guy that has a much higher probability of hitting than Michael Penix at 47. There's going to be a lot of good receiving talent. We need another cornerback. Maybe you decided if you go receiver in the first round, like a Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., which now seemingly is like a possibility. You could look to the second round and say, well, let's go get a cornerback to pair with Deonte Banks. We have an extremely young secondary on a cost-controlled contracts. We have our WR1 for the next 5+ years, and we figure out the quarterback situation down the road. Maybe that's what they end up doing. It's not my preference, but anything's possible because the draft is unpredictable and you just don't know who's going to be there when you pick. So yeah, what is your thought about that in terms of just, are you okay taking a risk in the second round on a quarterback or even moving up into the first round to get Michael Penix? I just think it's too much of a gamble because the drop off from the top four guys to 5, 6, 7, Bo Nix, Penix, Rattler, I'd rather take, maybe this is a crazy hot take, I'd rather take a gamble on Rattler in the third than Penix at the top of the second or even at the late first round.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that. I think that in terms of comparing those two prospects, Michael Penix is far superior to Rattler in many ways. So I would rather take Michael Penix over Spencer Rattler in the second versus the third. But like I said, if I want Michael Penix, I would want to trade up into the first round to get that fifth-year option because, and this is kind of the argument as to why maybe you don't want one of these guys, is development. You want to give Michael Penix as much time as possible to develop. So having him on that fifth-year option is really important. You want to give this kid as much time as possible, and if he's not broken out by year 4, at least you've got year 5, that fifth-year option. Or even if he is broken out, it's just a huge piece to have for negotiating purposes. Look at what happened to the Giants last year because they declined that fifth-year option on Daniel Jones. God damn, don't we wish that they picked up that fifth-year option now? We would not be in this mess. Why does this keep happening? This would not be in this mess with the New York Giants because Daniel Jones would have just played on that fifth-year option, and had he gotten injured, we wouldn't be talking about what do we do at quarterback. We would just be moving on from him and drafting one. So the fifth-year option is very important to have on a quarterback prospect. So if you were to take Michael Penix, if you're the New York Giants, I think you got to try and trade up to the 30th overall pick if he's still there. Take him there, which for what it's worth, is what they tried to do with DeAndre Baker a few years ago. It just didn't work out because DeAndre Baker had all those off-the-field red flags, the gun problem, whatever it was. He didn't work out for the Giants, but if you're going into a quarterback investment, you got to invest properly, and you have to get that fifth-year option, in my opinion. So, and then in terms of, do I see the drop-off with the other quarterbacks? Yeah, I have the top 4 here, and then I have Michael Penix a bit below with Bo Nix in a similar range, but then I do think there's a drop-off between Penix, Nix, and then you've got Rattler and those other guys, in my opinion. So I'd much prefer to take Penix, but I think that there is a lot to be said about taking Penix in round 2. So you're kind of asking me, would I even want to make the investment in a round 2 quarterback? Yes, if you get the right player in round 1. Like if the Giants do land a star-studded wide receiver in round 1, I think that you're okay taking the quarterback and waiting for him to develop because of what you have in your quarterback room right now. You still have Daniel Jones. If you've got to put him on the field, you can. You do have Drew Lock. If you've got to put him on the field, you can. If you really want to wait for Michael Penix to develop and not play him as a rookie, you really don't have to. You can let him sit for a long time because of the way that the Giants have this set up. They can wait to cut Daniel Jones next year and then give the starting reins to Michael Penix potentially. So that's what I would say in the argument of, would I be okay drafting him and letting him sit for a while? I probably would, but I do want to just ask you, Alex, I want to move into some of these other Washington prospects and discuss them, but before we do, I want to just ask if you have a takeaway from how many executives the Giants had at this event. Do you think that it shows, because this has been kind of a little bit of a debate on social media from Giants fans, some feel like it shows a significant interest in Michael Penix greater than they have in the other quarterbacks. They didn't go to the UNC Pro Day. They're having Drake May in for a meeting, but they didn't go to that Pro Day with this big contingency. They went with this contingent to the Washington Pro Day. Do you feel like this kind of shows a heightened interest in Michael Penix and maybe a preference here? Or do you think this is more so just, there's a lot of Washington prospects to like?
I think there's a lot of Washington prospects to like. They're one of the best. They were in the championship game. Like, there's a lot of really good players here. Look, Penix is the top dog, obviously, but the Giants have been going all around. They had a lot of people at Michigan's Pro Day to see a ton of Michigan players and Roman Wilson, a couple other guys there, and there's a couple of interesting names here that we haven't really discussed on this podcast ahead of the draft, and I think it's important to note them. And there's one guy in particular, Anthony, that we were just looking at before we started recording. They were like, why isn't this guy rated a lot higher than he is? Like, why is this guy like a day 3 pick? And his name is Roger Rosengarten. Really interesting prospect, offensive tackle, 6'5", 308 pounds. He had the 5th ranked offensive tackle athleticism score at the combine, a really great relative athletic score. Like, he was pretty freaking good. And this might be someone the Giants were looking at the Pro Day saying, let's get another look at him. We don't have to use a top 30 visit on him because we can talk to him at the Pro Day, see what he's about, interview with him a little bit. Really great athlete. This is an interesting player, my friends, and someone that last season played 993 snaps, almost 1,000 snaps at right tackle, and he didn't give up a single sack. In fact, he had only 15 pressures allowed the entire season. I don't know why he's not being talked about as a little bit more of a top prospect at the offensive line category. but there are limitations to his game. He has long legs, so there's bend concern there. Hand placement's a little off at times, but otherwise, he's a smart player, really good developmental upside. This is a guy I'd target in the fourth round. I could even see him sneak it up into the third round. Some people have him, kind of third, fourth round prospect projection. But, Anthony, looking at his stuff here, I mean, I'm like blown away that this guy is not being talked about at all. And maybe this is someone the Giants could target and say, maybe we could develop him. And look, Jermaine Illuminor, love the guy. We're going to interview him at some point this offseason. But his deal is essentially a one-year contract. So if the Giants decided, we're going to move off that contract, we like Rosengard, he's developing really quickly, you could push Neal inside. Maybe you add another name to the list here, and you have him develop behind the scenes. Carmen Brasilo's known for his developmental, prowess with young players, and even older players too, getting maximum value out of them. So, what are your thoughts on Rosengard? And could this be someone the Giants potentially target? Maybe they could even cross-train him at guard too. He's got some really good size.
Yeah, the number one thing that I'll note on Rosengarten is he's a right tackle. Why is that significant? Because he was a blindside protector for Michael Penix. That's something that I think is really interesting to note, because we all talk about Troy Fontenot as being the top tackle prospect coming out of Washington, and he is. He's going to be a first-round pick. He's got a lot of tackle guard flexibility, and he's a really good prospect who should go in the top 20 picks in this draft. So you talk about Fontenot, probably not an option for the Giants, too rich for them to take an offensive tackle there. But then you look over to the other side of the line. Who was actually protecting Michael Penix's blind side this season? It was Rosengarten. But here's why you kind of asked, why isn't this guy going earlier? You look at his season stats, 0 sacks allowed, 15 pressures. Well, if you do look at the game versus Michigan, that's where you're going to find the problem. In that game alone, he had 5 pressures. And if you want to talk about how stellar his PFF grades were all season long, it plummeted to a 34.9 in that one game against Michigan. So that was the game where you had to have it, had to be your best, had to play against the best of the best and face the best competition possible. And he kind of crapped the bed. He didn't play so well in that game, and that's why Michael Penix got faltered by all of the pressure that he was facing. A lot of it was coming from the side of Ryan Rosengarten, not his best game there. So that's probably what scouts or Roger Rosengarten, rather, I said Ryan. That's probably what scouts are looking at. They're saying, hey, when he faced the top of competition at his collegiate level, which is similar to what he's going to face at the NFL level, and honestly, the NFL level is going to be tougher for him, he didn't play so well, and I think that's probably what they're looking at. And then if you read through some scouting reports on him, a lot of them do say that he lacks power in his upper body, and maybe that's a real concern for especially a team that wants to run the ball a lot. You want some powerful offensive linemen. That can definitely be a challenge, but yeah, I do agree with you. The athletic traits are there. I think that the production is there. He was a really good pass protector throughout the collegiate season, and he does have quick feet if you turn on a little bit of All-22 and take a look at him. He's a pretty good player with a lot of developmental traits. So if you want to take a flyer on a tackle to develop in rounds 4, maybe if he goes later, 5, I don't think he will though, because I was reading that he looked really good at his pro day yesterday, met with some teams and has boosted his draft stock. Probably a early day 3 player that I would absolutely take a flyer on if I were the New York Giants. I mean, listen, even if you like what they have in their starting 5 on the offensive line, depth. The Giants need depth on that offensive line. Rosengarten could be some valuable depth to this team, and I would very much like him. But I also want to give my take on another player, Alex, who rose his draft stock yesterday at the Washington Pro Day. It's going to be wide receiver Jalen Polk. They have 2 Jalen wide receivers. They have Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan. I prefer Polk, and I think that for what it's worth, before I dive into Polk, McMillan, also a really good player who I think is going to have a higher floor in the NFL just because what he does translates really well. He's a speed guy, deep threat, but the Giants already have that. They have Jalen Hyatt to play that role, so I don't think McMillan is going to be a top target for them. But if you're looking at Polk, the Giants don't have what Polk has. They don't have 6'2", 204-pound wide receiver who plays on the outside. That's really what you need. Maybe you could argue that they do with Darius Slayton. I actually, as soon as I said those numbers, I was like, those are very similar to the size of Darius Slayton, but those are very different players. Slayton is more of your deep threat. Polk runs over the middle of the field. He makes contested grabs. He's a player that when I was studying wide receivers last month, I did really like, and I came away a little bit shocked that he wasn't being talked about more. Yeah, Rome Odunze is the better player of the two. Rome Odunze was their X, and they had their Z as Jalen Polk, but Polk is a player where if you look at the highlights, you'll definitely be impressed. But if you look at the down-to-down production, I think you'll also be impressed with what you see in Jalen Polk. Alex, what is your take on those wide receivers? The 2 Jalens, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan. How do you feel about them? Do you think that they could be targets for the Giants on day 2 of the draft?
Yeah, I mean, look, both of them are really freaking good downfield. If you look at Jalen Polk's numbers, I mean, according to PFF, take it with a grain of salt, whatever you will, he had a 99.9 reception grade from on deep passes, 20-plus yards downfield, 567 yards, 5 touchdowns, and caught half of the passes thrown to him. He makes contested catches look pretty easy. He's a really interesting player that has really good body control, some solid hands. I do like him as a prospect in this draft class. The question is, do the Giants want another player that's more of a downfield-centric kind of asset here? You know what I mean? In the intermediate range was pretty solid at 170 yards in the center of the field, so he has made some really good catches center of the field. Another thing, like Michael Penix was really solid throwing to the middle of the field, which is generally something that NFL teams love to see. So I think that from a receiving standpoint, Jalen Polk was one of those benefactors. Same with Odunze. They really capitalized on in the middle of the field, but you see like his yardage behind the line of scrimmage, short, ranges, 0 to 9 yards from the line of scrimmage, basically non-existent. Like, he doesn't actually exist there. And the Giants have a lot of those guys. You know what I mean? They have the Wan'Dale Robinsons. They have, you could even argue Isaiah Hodgins was, kind of caught a couple slants last year, but they moved him downfield too. They have so many of these downfield, intermediate, deep range receivers. I'd like to get some more refined route runners that can operate like we saw OBJ on those slants. They can operate on those backside digs. They can operate on those quick outs. Like I like those guys too. Like the dirty work needs to happen. And I think that Jalen Polk did not do a lot of those types of things at the college level, but he is a playmaker, and the Giants need more of those types of guys. That's kind of like why I love Ladd McConkey, though, because that dude just is such an elite route runner. You can use him all over the field.
Yeah, I actually disagree with you, though, on terms of the receivers that the Giants have. I feel like in that 0 to 9 yard range, they've got Wan'Dale Robinson. They've got Daniel Bellinger. If Darren Waller comes back, he's also your primary target in the 0 to 9 range. I think that the Giants have that. It's the 10 to 19 yard range that they don't have. To me, right now, it feels like the Giants' offense is incomplete from a passing standpoint because they have guys who are 20-plus yard receivers, which is your Darius Slayton primarily and your Jalen Hyatt. And then they have Wan'Dale Robinson, who's your 0 to 9, 10 to 19 yard guy. But who is your 10 to 19 yard range guy who does run the backside dig, who does run the corner route, the post route over the middle of the field, or a deep slant? That, to me, could be Jalen Polk in your Z formation. I think that Slayton can continue playing on that X, but as a Z, or maybe you could swap those two. I think that it goes either way, but that guy who runs the backside dig, I think Jalen Polk is that. I mean, in the 10 to 19 yard range, that made the majority of his targets at 36%. 39 targets, 24 receptions, 368 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Those are pretty good stats. And one of the things that I do really like about Jalen Polk, he has a career contested catch rate of over 53%, which is a very solid number. If you're catching more than half of your contested balls, you are very good at doing that, and that translates to the NFL level. But Polk doesn't just make contested catches. He does get open, especially in that 10 to 19 yard range, and I think that's what's really important to note. So while I see what you're saying, I just kind of disagree with the makeup of the Giants' offense. I think that they have enough 0 to 9 yard guys, mainly being the tight ends, plus Wan'Dale Robinson having that ability. It's the 10 to 19 yard range when you got to throw to the sticks or throw just a little bit past the sticks. That's where they need to improve, and I think that's where Jalen Polk could really make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily saying I only wanted a guy that can be the short range guy, but more so like of a more encompassing receiver that can do it all. That's kind of where I was looking at in terms of Jalen Polk. He is more of that intermediate to deep range guy. I would love to have a receiver, and we talk about Odunze, he's kind of that guy. He can do it short, intermediate, and deep. But that's what WR1s do. They can operate in all facets of the field.
Right.
And I think the Giants, obviously are missing that WR1. I don't see Jalen Polk as a WR1. I think he's more of that deeper kind of option, more of a WR2 kind of maybe upside. But if you're going at 40, probably the best, I wouldn't even say, I'm trying to think of a receiver that would be good. It has kind of that balance. It's tough.
I don't think you're getting one of those full route tree at all 3 level guys at 47. And, I love this draft class and all the
Ricky
wide receivers in this draft class. Pearsall, yeah, that's a good call. That's actually a pretty good call out. I think that he could run your routes at all 3 levels of the field, over the middle of the field as well. But other than that, even Xavier Legette, everybody knows how much I love Xavier Legette. slants, goes, comebacks, but how about that backside dig, 10 to 19 yards? I'm not so sure. A deep out, I'm not so sure. Like these guys that we're talking about in the second round really aren't those complete receivers who make the plays at every level of the field. So you do have to find specific players, and I think that specifically for the Giants needing someone in that 10 to 19 range on the backside digs, that's why I like Jalen Polk for them in the second round. But when you're talking about these guys in the second round, I don't think you're getting a full, complete product. But that's why we get enamored by the guys like Odunze and Malik Neighbors. That's why we're so excited about them potentially.
Maybe Roman Wilson could be one of those guys too at 47. He can operate in all sides of the field. He's a little bit smaller.
I agree. My only thing with Roman Wilson, Michigan receiver for those listening, Roman Wilson, my thing with him is just I think he plays better in the slot. Yes, he had some snaps out wide, and he showed that he has the ability to develop more outside, but even still, it seems a little bit similar to what we have in Wan'Dale Robinson once again.
Yeah, no,
in terms of playing style.
He's definitely a little bit smaller, but he's physical too. Like he can make some contested catches. I liken him to Golden Tate in a lot of ways. Someone that I saw a little bit of Golden Tate in his film, and that was kind of
Cole Beasley for me.
Cole Beasley, yeah. And that's kind of like I think that Roman Wilson's a better intermediate to deep route runner than Cole Beasley by far, because Beasley was more of a short guy. But I think I see like the Golden Tate version of a little bit of Golden Tate in the intermediate range for Roman Wilson, the speed, the contact balance, but also the short route running of Cole Beasley. Like I think he could be a pretty solid player, and because Michigan's offense was so dedicated to the run, you didn't see a lot of production from Roman Wilson in terms of yards, but the guy was a freaking touchdown merchant. I think he could be a very sneaky good player, a really good value grab in the second round for the Giants, and someone that could be inside out. He has that physicality. He's fast as hell, good route runner. He's a leader. I love that about him, his tangible qualities, intangibles rather. Really, really good guy in the locker room to have. That leadership we kind of need after losing Saquon and Xavier McKinney. So I kind of feel as though we need to be bringing in those like high character guys. And Roman Wilson is one of those high character guys, especially if the Giants were to get J.J. McCarthy in the first round, pairing him with Roman Wilson. It's not out of the possibility that that's something that could actually unfold. And that instant chemistry would probably go a long way. But, anything's possible. The Giants can go a myriad of different ways. But in terms of receivers in the second round, Jalen Polk is an interesting one. Mickey Millen probably later on than that. But Washington's got a lot of good prospects, man. Like they really have a deep class of guys that could be drafted by the Giants. I'm not surprised they had so many people at the Washington Pro Day. Also, low key, Anthony, maybe this is a narrative that's a little bit of an interesting one. Because so many contingencies were at that pro day, maybe it was a good opportunity for Joe Schoen and Brian Dable to speak with other general managers, speak with other head coaches, just communicate on the front of, what is going on, what are you guys thinking, trades, this, that, just getting to meet them face to face. Sometimes is a little bit better than meeting them, in terms of just over the phone on a quick phone call. Seeing them in person could, things happen. That's why so much stuff happens at the NFL Combine, because they're face to face having these conversations. It's always nice to have those that chemistry and those links. So maybe it's an underrated narrative. I'm not saying it means anything, but that face value, that face time, I think could go a long way towards generating some buzz at certain spots.
No, I think that's a really good point. Nobody's really made that point that I've seen about how many people were at the Giants or at the Washington Pro Day for the Giants. Listen, those are all connection events. Those are all networking events. The Giants are not only networking with the players that they're scouting, but with the other scouts in the area at the event. So yeah, you make a really good point there. There's absolutely an opportunity for the Giants at every pro day to speak to other GMs and say, hey, how are you feeling? You still trying to trade down? You still trying to trade up? And, check the weather on those certain situations. So I think that's a really good point that you make. And in terms of any other wide receivers that I would just throw out there to kind of round out that conversation about those prospects in round two, you were saying that you kind of want somebody to be able to play in that 0 to 20 yard range for the Giants, that short and intermediate. I do hate to say it, but at my list of wide receivers right here, I'm looking at a guy, and it probably is Malachi Corley who makes those plays. So I'm going to give you a little bit of props. I know that's your guy, so I want to call him out. But actually looking at my list, Jalen Polk is the next best suited on my list to play that role, if we're not talking Xavier Legette, who you guys know how high I am on him. And then for Ladd McConkey, I do have to just point him out because you mentioned him. I think the more and more you look at him, the more likely it is he's going in round 1. If he does fall into the second round, though, that's a guy that the Giants have to trade up for. They got to snap him real fast, but I think that McConkey's going round 1. He's a sick player, but deep wide receiver class for sure.
Oh no, 100%. McConkey, if he doesn't go around, I want to be really surprised. He has WR1 upside in the right offense. Elite route runner, good hands, good dude, high work ethic. I love the prospect there. I think Ricky Pearsall is like a similar player in a lot of ways, but could be there in the second round, and maybe that's where the Giants look. But end of the day, lots of receivers in this draft class. The Giants. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr., Odunze, and Malik Neighbors are a different tier in their own right. You could even argue Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. are in their own tier, like 1A, 1B situation. A lot of people have them flip-flopped. But the Giants are going to get tremendous value wherever they pick. We're going to add some blue-chip prospects no matter what, in my opinion, whether it be a receiver, a quarterback. There's so much value this year. I think the Giants are going to do whatever they can to hold on to that 47th overall pick, though. If they want to move up, I think we're trading future draft value, because I just don't see a world where they want to give up this 47th pick. If they have no choice, I think they will, but they're going to try their best to hold on to it. I'd say the 47th overall pick may be more valuable than next year's first round pick, just because of how deep this draft class is.
I think you make a good point there, and I think that I would agree with you. And that's why I'm still heartbroken that the Giants gave up that number 39 overall pick in that trade to Brian Burns. Happy to have Burns, but man, that 39 overall pick was a huge bargaining chip and a potential trade up for a quarterback if the Patriots do make number 3 overall available and Drake May or Jaden Daniels is sitting on the board. The one thing that I'll say that just to kind of ruin your day in a way, you said you feel like for sure the Giants are going to land a blue chip prospect. Not necessarily. If you don't view J.J. McCarthy as a blue chip prospect and they take him in the first round, I don't think they're getting a blue chip in the second round. That would be the way to not land a blue chip prospect despite holding a top 10 pick. So that's the only argument that I would make. And you guys know I do like J.J. McCarthy, but blue chip would be a really strong word to use for J.J. McCarthy. So, but hey, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, I think you could argue those guys might be blue chip. And who knows, maybe somebody falls into the middle rounds that we can't tell is blue chip now, but once they get to the NFL, they have that breakout every year. There are late round picks that have amazing NFL careers. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be really exciting. That about wraps up the conversation on the Washington prospects, though. We'll continue to dive into these guys. And if you liked our conversation here on these wide receivers generally, just talking about who we liked and what we saw from them in our kind of own personal evaluation and scouting of these guys, let us know, because maybe we'll do an episode just not even necessarily Giants related, but maybe Alex and I will sit down and just do top 10 wide receivers in this draft class and go through the guys that we like. If you guys are interested in that, let us know down below in the comment section. And yeah, let us know your thoughts on the Giants scouting Michael Penix and really all of these Washington players. Maybe if there's a Washington player we didn't really touch on, Braylon Trice, we didn't really mention him. Maybe you guys want us to. Let us know down below in the comment section. But that pretty much wraps this one up. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we will catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.